Good afternoon, you guys. It's your boy B Mahari here, represent Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the basketball community. And welcome to all the new subscribers that are coming on to this channel, though, too. So spread the word about this channel. For all the new people that are just coming in, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I go live and when I release videos, okay? Um, this week has been popular about the Last Dance documentary, and Michael's history as an executive and as an owner for the Charlotte Bobcats / Charlotte Hornets now. But for this particular video, I'm going to go into bit depth about Michael Jordan's history as an executive, going back to when he was the executive for the Washington Wizards and when he became majority owner of the Charlotte Bobcats, now the Charlotte Hornets, in 2010. You understand what I'm saying? So, follow with me here as we go through this entire section here, okay? The problem that has been for Michael Jordan is this. Michael Jordan, you know, has a huge hard time, evaluating talent or just being able to see, good players and bad players, because when you're the greatest player of all time, it's very hard to judge, talent, because it's come so easy to you that it may not come easy for other people. And that's been the kind of constant theme for Michael Jordan as his time when he became an executive for, the Charlotte Hornets or Bobcats, and when he became owner. And you could go all the way back to when he was an executive for the Washington Wizards, because he trusted his friends Rod Higgins and Fred Whitfield, who had great relations with Michael Jordan, but are notoriously horrible for their roles of evaluating talent and finding the best draft picks and making good trades for themselves. Okay. Now, when you look at Michael Jordan's resume as an executive, okay, when he was an executive for the Washington Wizards up until 2003, both of those seasons they went 37 and 45. Now, at that time, they were improvements. The problem was Michael decided to come back and try to play and try to enforce the improvement to go a bit faster, and then instead of trying to develop the talent and trying to build a foundation with the team. And he hired Doug Collins, who was obviously Jordan's favorite coach during his time in Chicago. But when you look back at his role as an executive, man, I mean, Kwame Brown is the most highlighted one of all, because, I mean, come on. Kwame Brown as your number one overall pick in the draft over guys like Paul Gasol, who went on to win Rookie of the Year that year, Tony Parker, Gilbert Arenas before he got traded to Washington a few seasons later, Joe Johnson, Jason Richardson, who played for the Golden State Warriors and had a really good career, and Zach Randolph, which was, man. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man, but that Kwame Brown draft pick still makes my throat dry and makes me want to shake my head, because the problem with Jordan constantly is this: that the game of basketball became so easy to Jordan because he was able to learn it and be able to learn the psychology of the game. The problem is when you're so good at one particular thing, it's hard to teach it. It's hard to describe it to other people that don't have the same, IQ or the same mindset that you have. And I believe that's been one of the big problems for Michael Jordan as his time as an executive for Washington, because because a lot of the teammates would tell you that Michael Jordan was the same way that he was when he was in Chicago too. He was a hard ass, he always putting pressure on teammates, but he didn't have the pieces around him, to really handle his kind of critique and criticism. And, it became a horrible time for a lot of the players who were playing with him in Washington. So, other than that, he had, Richard Hamilton, who really helped Richard Hamilton improve his mid-range shooting, learn how to come out picks better, and learn how to use up fakes better. And I think Richard Hamilton credits Jordan for helping him craft that. But before the 02-03 season, he made a shocking trade. He decided to trade, okay? He decided to make the trade. He decided to trade Richard Hamilton to the Detroit Pistons for All-Star Jerry Stackhouse. And why is that trade was significant? Because Jerry Stackhouse played in North Carolina, and played against Michael Jordan one-on-one when Michael was in the stages of retirement and was making his comeback to basketball. And so he had a lot of relations with North Carolina, you know, affiliates out there. You know what I mean? Then he signed Charles Oakley, which was one of his great best friends. And then he signed Byron Russell to the Wizards, too. The guy that he broke his ankles to in the 98 finals. All right. I mean, just really, really bad moves. And then in that '03 draft class, okay, he drafted for his first pick Jared Jeffries, 11th overall from Indiana. Juan Dixon, who was the most outstanding player, you know, in Maryland when they won the national title that year. Rod Grizzard from Alabama in the second overall, and Juan Carlos Navarro from Spain. Just it was terrible, beyond terrible, and the team wasn't improving. And so after that, Doug Collins got the boot, and Jordan got the boot afterwards by Abe Poland. You know what I mean? When things didn't work out, you know what I mean? And when Michael Jordan became an executive for the Charlotte Bobcats, it continued to get worse over time. I mean, the draft list is just beyond ridiculous. I mean, the most recent one was from 2017 when he decided to draft Malik Monk over Donovan Mitchell. And Donovan Mitchell went on to win Rookie of the Year. Can you imagine having Donovan Mitchell in the Charlotte Hornets right now? Then 2015, he drafts Frank Kaminsky from Wisconsin over Devin Booker. 2013, he drafted Cody Zeller over CJ McCollum and Giannis Antetokounmpo. 2012, this is the one and this is one of the few ones I just shake my head. He drafted Michael Kidd Gilchrist over Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal. 09, he drafted Gerald Henderson Jr. over Drew Holiday. 08, DJ Augustine over Brook Lopez. 07, Brandon Knight, by the way, went to North Carolina. So you can see the affiliation there, the relationship at that North Carolina Tar Heel connection over Joakim Noah, who won back-to-back national championships. And then the worst one of all, the absolute worst of it all, 06, he drafted Adam Morrison from Gonzaga over Brandon Roy. Just, man. It was just bad. The Adam Morrison one, was just bad. He tried to, get seats, fans in the stands by bringing a Bible Belt person in to Charlotte, but you should have drafted the best player on the board, which was Brandon Roy. You feel what I'm saying? I mean, the list of times that Michael Jordan has been horrible at draft picks has been pathetic. And then it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there because then besides drafting Kwame Brown, when he was in Charlotte too, he basically traded for Stigana Job. All right. So he paid at least $7 million over a year for him to sit on the bench, and he didn't do anything with it. And that time they traded Matt Carroll, okay, and Ryan Hollins. Now, in fairness to both of those players, they weren't any good anyway, but both of them combined were a little bit more worthy than Stigana Job. All right? Because Michael knew how bad he was, and he did have some decent defensive skills, but the problem was he was always fat and out of shape. He never ran back on defense and was always sucking wind every time. Ridiculous. You want me to keep going? Then he traded Gerald Wallace, who was the face of that Charles Bobcats franchise and literally was carrying that franchise on his back. All right. And was there for their playoff appearance. All right. And he didn't realize how bad that trade was. So he decided to trade an excellent player, a role model, and threw him all the way for some payroll to look for the future. You know what I mean? It was just, it was bad. Besides drafting Adam Morrison, too, then he traded Emeka Okafor, a guy that signed a 6-year, $72 million deal, which is basically the cost when they resigned him. And then they immediately traded him for, Tyson Chandler, who was at that point in time was an unachieving player before he became the defensive monster that he became. All right. You know what I mean? That was a bit of a risky trade, that really didn't work out well. All right. Then he kept basically trying to rebuild the franchise by trading away the pieces that he once had. Bismack, basically, Gerald Wallace, Steven Jackson, Emeka Okafor. I mean, these were the guys that helped Larry Brown get to the playoffs in that only 1 year. And was it back in 2010 or something like that? Let me check it out real quick. Brown, because he led the Bobcats to their only playoff appearance at that time. So and that was in 2010, yes. So he went up to 44 regular season victories and led them to their only playoff appearance in that what is it that in that 7 year stretch before they rechanged the team to the Charlotte Hornets, I should say. You know what I mean? Just oh man, it was just really really bad, and I don't know if it's going to continue to get any better because despite drafting uh, Kemba Walker, you even lost him to free agency. So now what do you have? You don't really have much to work with now. You know what I mean? Michael has just been a guy that just has not put good people that could do the job effectively. He's been kind of the person that's been hiring these yes men type of people. Now, to be honest here, I think that the new GM has kind of done a decent job to a certain extent. But to be honest with you, this team, the way that they've looked right now, they just not been looking really, really good. You know what I mean? Just they've only made to the playoffs at least the once in the last 7 years, the once in the last what since 2010. They've only made the playoffs twice in that decade. Only to play the playoffs twice. I mean, it's just I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I just don't get how Michael continuously keeps messing up every single time. But it reminds me of comparisons to Elgin Baylor. Elgin Baylor, one of the greatest forwards in the history of the game. If you have not watched some of his highlight reels, do yourself a favor, go check it out. One of the original high flyers of the NBA. But when Elgin Baylor became an executive the Los Angeles Clippers for Donald Sterling in 1986, he was he had a really bad set. He only made the playoffs 4 times, and 2 of those times, Larry Brown's was his head coach. You know what I mean? He helped them lead them to the playoffs in '92 and '93. You know what I mean? So he had 92, 93. He had Danny Manning, he had Ron Harper, he had Mark Jackson, he had Stanley Roberts, and he also had what else did he had? Ken Norman. All right, but other than that, that Clippers team was pretty talented at that time, but they just never kept it together. They just never, you know, they never kept building on that team, and they kept continuously breaking that team apart. I too want to get over to the draft picks that Elgin Baylor had. His first draft class back in 1987. So listen to this. In 1987, in that draft, he drafted Reggie Williams of Georgetown. The Reggie Williams that was playing with Patrick Ewing in Georgetown over Scottie Pippen, Kevin Johnson, and Reggie Miller, which was really, really bad. 88, he had the number 1 overall pick and drafted Danny Manning. I mean, if you didn't draft Danny Manning as your number 1 pick in the draft, something wrong with you. So he did that. Then they drafted Danny Ferry over Glenn Rice, Tim Hardaway, and Sean Kemp. And Danny Ferry had no interest of going to the Clippers at all. He decided to play overseas for about a couple of years, and then they traded the draft pick to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Ron Harper. All right. Then in 1990, they drafted Bo Kimball from Loyola Marymount during that Cinderella run in the NCAA tournament over Cedric Ceballos and Tony Kukoc. 1992, Randy Woods from LaSalle University over swingman Latrell Sprewell, who became a 4-time All-Star. 93, Terry DeHare over Sam Cassell and Nick Van Exel. 94, Lamont Murray over Eddie Jones. That 94 draft class was the same draft class as Glenn Robinson, Grant Hill, and Jason Kidd. Okay, 96, which was really, really bad. They drafted Lorenzen Wright, rest in peace, over Peja Stojakovic, Steve Nash, Jermaine O'Neal, and Kobe Bean Bryant. Ooh, Jesus. You want me to keep going? Okay, we'll keep going. 97, they drafted Maurice Taylor, which was not bad of a draft pick, but I mean, they were only the only two good draft picks of that class in '97 were pretty much Tim Duncan and Keith Van Horn, and they were taken as the top two picks. Then '98, which was the oh man, which was probably beats out what happened in '96. They drafted Michael Olowokandi from Liberty over Vince Carter, Dirk Nowitzki, and Paul Pierce. Shaking my head, man. Just shaking my head. 99. Um, they drafted Lamar Odom, which was a really good draft pick. 2000. I mean, it was a really really weak draft class. They drafted Darius Miles coming out of high school. I mean, he was a decent player that could have been something, but he got injured a lot. Okay, then they drafted Tyson Chandler, which was a really good draft pick coming out of high school. Another one, surprisingly. But then they traded him to Chicago for Elgin Baylor, which was a good trade by his part. At least he made a good trade of that. '02, I was shocked at this one. '02, he drafted Chris Wilcox from Maryland over Amari Stoudemire and Karan Butler. Any of those two guys would have been major upgrades. And if you want to check out what Amari did to Michael Olowokandi in the 02-03 season, go check out Amari Stoudemire dunks over Michael Olowokandi, and you'll see what I'm talking about, okay? '03, they drafted Chris Kaman, who was a decent player, you know what I mean? But, he had a decent career, you know what I mean? It wasn't that bad. '04, Sean Livingston, who was a really good player at that time before the knee injury that really much derailed his career. And then '05, they drafted a Russian player named Yaroslav Kovalev from Russia over Danny Granger in the second round. And then his last draft pick, he drafted Al Thornton, which was really, really bad. But I will say that Elgin Baylor did make some good trades that I found off the board. In '92, they did traded Charles Smith and Doc Rivers to the Knicks for Mark Jackson, which was a really good move on his part to get him to the playoffs. But and then also he traded, to the Magic for future first round pick for Corey Maggette, Derek Strong, and Keon Dooley. I mean, Corey Maggette was a really good player for them and really made a good punch with Elton Brand. And then he did make the acquisition for Sam Cassell, which got him to the playoffs and really almost pulled off the huge upset against the Phoenix Suns in the second round. So not bad of a trader, though, too, unlike Michael. But other than that, during the 22 years that he served as an executive, okay, they only made the playoffs 4 times. They only had 2 winning seasons, and he compiled a record of 607 victories to 1,153 losses. If that's not pathetic, I don't know what is. And it really illustrates my point of between those two comparisons here, because the problem with both of those guys had, other than just bad ownership, because Elgin Baylor had a racist owner in Donald Sterling, so we cannot dismiss that part. Okay, the problem with both those owners is that they were both, both executives, I should say, between Baylor and Michael Jordan, was that Michael and Elgin Baylor was so supremely talented in what they did, but it's hard to teach a kid how to play the game through your eyes and through your perspective, because it came so much easier to you. And when it comes so easier to you, it's hard to teach it. It's hard to explain it and basically articulate it to a young player or to a veteran player that is way below your status. You know what I mean? And that's been one of the big problems for Michael Jordan. And the other big problem I had with Michael Jordan was that he kept hiring these yes people. He kept hiring his closest people around him that he knows that he can trust, rather than bringing in people in that could do their jobs effectively and know how to scout. Because the big problem I had with Michael Jordan was he never took the time to do the job. He never learned how to scout talent. He never took the time to watch any high school or college games to really evaluate talent, something that Jerry Krause was the greatest at. You want to talk about one of the great recruiters besides Jerry West. Jerry Krause was an excellent recruiter and was able to make the moves necessary to help formulate that Bulls dynasty. You know what I mean? And the one thing that Jerry Krause made the biggest sense of all was during that early stages when he was the general manager, Michael Jordan made a request to get some of his North Carolina guys in, particularly the guy by the name of Al Wood, who was a really good player back in his college days, but wasn't much in the NBA. And Jerry Krause even said, I had to ignore him because Michael kept seeing Carolina blue. And unfortunately, that's what has been the big problem for Michael Jordan. He kept bringing in guys that were basically North Carolina Tar Heel affiliated, you know what I mean? And then he drafted guys who came from North Carolina. All right. And don't forget, I forgot to mention Sean May, too, who was most outstanding player in 05, but he drafted him, too. And his career got derailed by injuries, and he couldn't keep himself in shape. So when you really look at all these things, though, guys, it really paints a bad picture of how bad Michael was as an executive and as an owner even today. I mean, throughout all the coaches he's hired and fired, through one season or another, the problem is you can't fire yourself. You can't force your will or your intellect on the people in running your organization because they're all different people. It's hard for him to do that. So, I wish him nothing but luck, in terms of building, the Charlotte Hornets franchise. But it really goes back to the video I dropped about the Barkley and Jordan relationship, about how they deteriorated, because Barkley was absolutely correct. Michael was terrible as an executive because he always brings in people that he trusts the most. As Barkley put it, he has to stop hiring these ass kissers in his organization. And Michael took that offensively because he knew Barkley was correct. All right. Barkley was not going to lie. And honestly, I think that Charles Barkley was more honest with Jordan than maybe some of his closest friends around him, because Barkley is unapologetic to some of the things he says. Now, I don't agree with everything that he talks about, but at the same time, Barkley was absolutely correct in that particular stance. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be surprised, and I said this on my other video yesterday about the Barkley and Jordan relationship. If the Hornets, made a deep playoff run, if they went on to win, let's say 55, 57 games, whatever season they might have, and make a deep run in the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if, Jordan calls up, Barkley and basically tells him, now you see what I've been doing? I proved you wrong now, huh? In a weird kind of way, maybe in a sense, apologizing to Barkley for basically, devaluing what he said and basically cutting him off completely. Because Michael is a weird kind of person that way. Because as he said before, his biggest addiction is a competition addiction. He just can't stop competing, and he wants to win in the worst way. And most of the time, it's overcloud his judgment and overcloud his intellect. You understand what I'm saying? So that pretty much explains how bad he's been as an executive as an owner for the Charlotte Hornets. You know what I mean? So I wish him nothing but the best. I hope that he's been able to turn it around and produce a good team in Charlotte. But the way that his history is shown, I mean, he's in the Elgin Baylor class. I mean, let's just put it that way. And it's very, very sad because he's still the greatest player. Both of them were great players in their respective eras, but their legacies, post-basketball careers, have been completely tarnished of how poorly they performed as general managers, and for Michael Jordan specifically, as an owner of the then Charlotte Bobcats and / Charlotte Hornets. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section, though. Let me know what your thoughts are on the video I displayed for you guys. Y'all take care now.